The music had gone sour before Robb Stark realized it. He stood beside Catelyn Stark at the high table, the weight of his sword at his hip and of every broken oath on his shoulders. The hall of the twins smelled of grease and smoke and spilled ale. Laughter rang too loudly from the Frey benches, a brittle sound over the droning of the pipes. Servants carried trenchers to and fro, and somewhere down the table Edmure Tully tried to smile at the young wife he had won as the price of Robb's own faithlessness. Robb's throat was dry. He took another pull from his cup, tasting cheap wine and ash. Walder Frey's milky eyes watched him over the rim of his own goblet, amused and flat as stagnant water. "Smile," Catelyn murmured under her breath, lips barely moving. "If you cannot be happy, at least look as if you might live long enough to regret this." He glanced at her, at the silver threaded through her auburn hair, the lines carved deep by war and grief. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "I regret that we had no good choices left," Catelyn Stark said. "Now hush, and let these people pretend we are all friends." The band shifted their song. The sound caught at him, some half-familiar northern air twisted into something off-key. A man at the next table barked a laugh that felt wrong in his bones. The hairs rose on the back of Robb's neck. Gray wind prowled at the edge of his thoughts, uneasy. The dire wolf was penned outside, away from the feast under some Frey excuse about barking and upsetting the bride. Their bond, ever since the first days at Winterfell, had never been so faint. It felt as if he had locked a piece of himself in a cage. One of the Frey girls giggled too loudly. Walder Frey lifted a hand, and the noise in the hall dipped like a wave before it breaks. "My lords, my ladies," the old man croaked. "You have eaten our bread, drunk our wine, and shared our salt. We are most honored by your presence, King Robb." Something in the way he said king made Robb's hand twitch toward his sword. He forced himself to nod, the motion stiff. "House Stark is grateful for your welcome, Lord Walder." Catelyn's fingers tightened around her cup. Her eyes flickered to the doors, then to the musicians in the corner. She was counting, he realized. Men at the walls, men at the doors, men who were Freys and men who were his. He followed her gaze. Too many Freys, too many crossbowmen in the gallery for a simple feast. Had they been there a moment ago? His heart stuttered once, a hard, slow beat. The tune the band played turned fully now, the notes twisting into the Rains of Castamere, and the bottom dropped out of Robb Stark's stomach. His chair scraped stone as he straightened, hand going all the way to the hilt of his sword. Catelyn moved first, quicker than he remembered she could, seizing the sleeve of one of Walder's sons, fingers digging into flesh. Her voice was thin and high. "Robb!" He heard her, but she was already too late. The first crossbow twanged. The bolt hit him like a hammer, slamming into his side beneath the mail where his armor had loosened with the hours of sitting. Fire exploded along his ribs. He staggered, breath punched out of him, wine sloshing from his cup. Another bolt struck his shoulder, spinning him against the high table. He went to one knee, vision blurring. Men were shouting. From somewhere distant he heard his own name screamed, the sound cracking with terror. Guards in stark colors surged up, swords half-drawn, and were cut down by Frey men-at-arms rising from the benches. The air filled with the whistle of quarrels, with splintering wood and choking smoke. Robb tried to stand. His legs felt hollow. He groped for his sword, fingers slick. Catelyn was shouting something. Pleading? Cursing? Her voice broke on a name he could not make out. Another bolt slammed into the side of his neck, glancing off the curve where his gorget didn't quite meet the mail. Hot blood sprayed across the table, across the Frey girl's pale dress. She shrieked, but it was only sound, lost in the storm. Robb Stark's next breath came wet. The hall tilted, torch flames smearing into smudges of orange. He tasted iron and smoke. So this is how the North ends, he thought distantly. Not with a sword in hand on some cold field, but as a drunk at a treacherous feast. The floor rushed up to meet him. Sound came back to him in jagged pieces. Steel on steel. Screams. the wet thud of bodies hitting stone. Robb lay half-curled on the floor, his own breath ragged in his ears. Catelyn was above him, fingers clawed in the sleeve of a Frey son who stared at her in horror, too young for the malice around him. "You promised me," she was saying, "by the old gods and the new. You swore it, you." Her words broke off in a hoarse cry as steel flashed. Robb tried to push himself up, tried to reach her, but his arm refused him. He saw the arc of a blade, the spray of red, and then Catelyn Stark's voice was gone from the world. Something inside him tore more cleanly than any flesh. He did not hear his own raw, broken shout. A shadow fell over him, mail clinking, the tang of sweat and river water cutting through the stink of blood and roasted meat. A hand gripped his collar, another slid under his arm. "Up, boy!" Brynden Tully snarled in his ear. "You will not die on this filthy floor." Robb tried to focus on his uncle's face. The Blackfish's hair was more white than gray now, his jaw set like stone. "Mother," Robb croaked. His voice had become someone else's, thin and wet. "Uncle, my mother, she's gone," Brynden Tully said, and the words were a sword driven in. "But you're not yet. Move." Arrows hissed down. One clattered off the flagstone inches from Robb's outstretched hand. The Blackfish half lifted, half dragged him, ignoring the blood slicking his own grip. Robb's legs flailed uselessly, boots slipping in spilled wine and entrails. A Freyguard lunged toward them, sword raised. Brynden Tully shoved Robb behind the overturned bench in a single rough motion and met the man with his own steel. The clash of blades rang loud. Robb's vision narrowed to his uncle's back, to the sure, economical movements as the Blackfish feinted, parried, and drove his sword up under the Freys' mail. The man gasped, sagged, and slid off the blade. "Up!" Brynden hissed again. "Now!" Robb's world had shrunk to pain and the iron grip on his arm. The hall around them burned and bled. Men he had named Lord and Knight fell screaming. The Frey banners leered down from the rafters. Walder Frey was laughing. An ugly, hacking sound like a man choking on his own bile. "The king in the north," he crowed. "See how he crawls. Aim for the wolf, lads. A crown's worth a good quarrel, eh?" Robb's jaw clenched. He wanted to turn, to charge across the hall and drive his sword through that withered chest. His hand twitched toward his hilt, but his fingers would not close. Brynden Tully yanked him toward a narrow servant's door half lost behind a tapestry. "Save your anger," the Blackfish growled. "Spend it where it can buy something." They crashed through the door as another volley of bolts clattered against stone, one punching through the tapestry where Robb's head had been a heartbeat before. The corridor beyond was dim and close, lit only by a single guttering torch. The stench of the hall gave way to the sour tang of damp stone and old rushes. Behind them, the feast turned fully to slaughter. Ahead, the passage sloped downward, away from light and music and the last of Robb Stark's illusions. The corridor was too narrow for two men, let alone two men and their wounds. Brynden half-carried Robb, shoulders brushing stone on either side. Their footfalls slapped wetly, leaving a trail of red in their wake. A serving girl flattened herself against the wall as they lurched past. Her eyes were huge in her pinched face, apron spotted with wine and someone else's blood. Robb caught a glimpse of her as a bolt loosed from somewhere back in the hall cracked against the doorframe and ricocheted down the passage, snapping sparks from the stone. "Go!" Brynden spat at the girl without slowing. "Down, away from the hall. If you scream, I'll gut you myself." She nodded jerkily, lips moving without sound, and fled into a side passage, bare feet slapping stone. Robb's side burned with each step, each jolt sending bolts of white pain up his spine. The corridor seemed to breathe, walls pulsing closer, shadows crowding. He bit back a groan as his boot slipped on something slick. Brynden swore and dragged him upright again. "It was supposed to be over," Robb rasped when he could drag in enough air. "We made peace. He took our oaths, Walder Frey's oaths are worth as much as his honor," Brynden said. "Less, perhaps. I warned your father of that long ago. Told him not to trust this miserable brood. He nodded, thanked me, and did as he must. Just like you did as you thought you must. His tone was harsh, but not unkind. Save questions for later. We need water first. And distance. Gray wind, Robb gasped. The separation gnawed at him more brutally now, a hollow ache in the center of his chest. Uncle, they've penned him outside. He'll be killed, Brynden finished flatly. Like the rest of us if we don't move. The words flayed him. Images crashed through his mind. Gray wind snarling at chains, bolts hammering into thick fur. The direwolf's howl strangled abruptly. He stumbled, and this time he did cry out. Brynden hissed a curse and shifted his grip, arm beneath Robb's shoulders now, half dragging him down the sloping passage. The torch at the far end guttered in some unseen draft. They passed a side door that hung slightly ajar. Male voices echoed from within, panicked and high. Frey boys who had thought to hide from their family's own treachery. Brynden didn't spare them a glance. Robb saw one pale face through the crack, eyes round and wet, before the blackfish hauled him onward. The passage opened at last into a small, low chamber where barrels were stacked 3 high. The air was damp and cold, smelling of river water and mold. A single round postern door stood in the far wall, barred by a wooden beam. Brynden all but flung Robb into a stack of sacks, then strode to the door, his sword point levered up the beam. He shouldered it aside with a grunt and shoved the door open. Night air rushed in, cold and wet, rich with the smell of the river. "Can you walk?" he demanded without looking back. Robb forced himself up, hand pressed to his side where the bolt jutted from his mail. "I can fall with purpose," he said through gritted teeth. "Will that do?" Brynden snorted. "That's all any of us ever do." "Come." They stepped out into the dark. The rain hit him like a second shock, cold knuckles striking his flushed skin. Robb sucked in a breath that tasted of mud and old stone. The roar of the feast hall was muffled here, the sounds of slaughter swallowed by thick walls. Only distant shouting and the faint clatter of boots on stone bridge echoed through the night. The twin towers loomed above, stark against a bruised sky. Their lights seemed fewer than they should have been, as if even candles had flinched from what was happening inside. In the lee of the wall, half lost in shadow, a knot of men turned toward the open postern. They wore Stark colors mostly, though some had hastily tugged on Frey cloaks over them. Faces Robb knew blinked rain from their eyes. Hallis Malin with his broken nose, dour old Ser Stevern's former squire whose name Robb could not presently drag from memory, 3 archers from the mountain clans. All of them stared as if they had seen a ghost crawl from the grave. "Your Grace," Hallis Malin breathed, stepping forward. Rain streaked the blood on his cheek. You thought rightly," Brynden Tully cut in. "He's dying, but not tonight if we can help it. Have you the boat?" "Aye." Malin jerked his chin toward the shadow of the embankment. There, half hidden under the bridge's arch, a small riverboat bobbed, its rope tied off to an iron ring. "We took her off a fisherman who won't be needing her again. The Freys have called most of their men to the hall. We saw the crossbows on the bridge turn inward, not out." A scream floated faintly from a high window, thin and desperate. Robb could not tell if it was man or woman. He swayed. Brynden's hand on his arm became a vice. "In the boat," the blackfish said. "Quickly now. They'll start counting bodies soon enough." The men moved at his word, boots sliding on wet stone as they hurried down the narrow steps cut into the riverbank. The water below was swollen and black, licking hungrily at the base of the towers. Robb's legs buckled on the 3rd step, vision graying at the edges. "Easy, lad," Brynden muttered. "There's a long way to fall yet." Hallis Malin came up on Robb's other side, shouldering under his weight. Between them, they half carried him down to the boat. The little craft dipped precariously as they eased him into it, his back slamming against the damp planks. Pain flared, bright and hot. He could not smother the groan that tore from him. "Sorry, your grace," Hallis said, voice thick. Robb swallowed it down, focusing on the feel of the river beneath him, the harsh rasp of Bryndon's breath, the muttered prayers of the men as they clambered aboard. One of them seized the rope and cast off. Another took up the oar. "Keep her under the bridge until we're clear of their sight lines," Bryndon ordered. "If they see us, we're dead men." As the boat drifted from the lee of the stone, Robb craned his neck. Through the pain and rain, he glimpsed the courtyard where they had ridden in only hours before, banners bright and music loud. Now the banners hung limp, and the only music was the distant, broken echo of the rains of Castamere, bleeding out into the night. A howl rose above that sound, faint, far off, but unmistakable. Gray wind. It cut through him more sharply than any arrow. The wolf's voice rose once, wild and furious, and then choked off mid-note. Robb's teeth sank into his lip until he tasted blood. He made no sound. There was nothing left to say. The river took the boat, drawing them away from the twins and everything still dying inside. The world shrank to the slap of oars and the rush of water against wood. The river pulled them swift and sure, a dark artery carrying a handful of stubborn blood away from the heart that had turned on itself. Robb stared up into the rain, blinking droplets from lashes that grew heavier with each heartbeat. His side felt like an open furnace. Every breath grated. The arrows were still in him, shafts jutting like accusations. "We need to take them out," Hallis muttered, eyes flicking from the riverbank shadows to Robb's wounds. "They'll fester, or he'll bleed out on us." "Not here," Bryndon said. The old knight's face was a grim mask in the lamplight, a single shuttered lantern tucked under a bench to keep it from prying eyes on the banks. "Let them plug the holes until we have shelter. I've no wish to watch his lifeblood pour into the trident." Robb wanted to tell them it was all right, that he would die as he was meant to, sword in hand, for the North, for his father, for the men who had followed him. He opened his mouth, but the words tangled around the iron taste in his throat. He saw their faces instead. Great John Umber's booming laugh, Talisa's smile when she held his hand to the swell of her belly, Catelyn's stern gaze softening for just a breath when he had been a boy with skinned knees. All of them flickered like candles in a gale. Something shifted inside him, cold and hard. Perhaps it was the moment he accepted he had failed them all. Perhaps it was the moment he decided failure was not the same as ending. "Uncle," he managed, voice a rasp. "Where are we going?" "Away," Bryndon said simply. Then, after a beat, "Downriver. There are a dozen little hovels and fishers' shacks along these banks. We find one empty, we borrow it. We get you patched enough to stand without looking like you're halfway to the grave. After that..." He shrugged one armored shoulder. "After that, we see who still lives to care whether Robb Stark breathes. Everyone in that hall is dead," one of the archers whispered. He was a young man, face barely whiskered, eyes hollow with shock. "I saw them cut down small John Umber. The Great John, too, maybe. Freys everywhere. It's over. The war's over. Wars only end when someone with enough power says they are over," Bryndon Tully said. "And I don't recall bending the knee to Walder Frey." Robb swallowed. Power. The word felt distant. He had worn a crown only to find it made his neck easier to aim at. "Does the North know?" he asked. "Have they planned this, the Boltons and the Freys and the Lannisters?" Saying the names scraped his tongue. "Likely," Bryndon admitted. "Your bannermen will find out in their own time. Ravens fly faster than boats. By the time we find a bed for you, every man from the Neck to Bear Island will have heard that Robb Stark and his mother died at a wedding with wine in their cups and no swords in their hands." The words settled over the boat like fresh fallen snow, heavy, muffling. Robb's fingers clenched in the wet wool of his cloak. "Good," he whispered. Bryndon's brows rose. "Good. If they think I'm dead," Robb said, each word pulled through pain, "they will make their choices without waiting for my command. Some will bend the knee to the Lannisters to save their people. Some will resist and die. Some will look to my sisters, my brothers. but they will act, and our enemies will stop looking for my head on every hill." He forced his eyes open, meeting his uncle's gaze. "So let them think me dead. For now." Hallis's oars faltered, the boat rocking. "Your Grace." "Keep rowing," Brynden snapped, but his eyes did not leave Robb's. There was something new in them now. Not pity, not the fond indulgence of an uncle for a nephew who had tried and failed. It was sharper, measuring. "A ghost king," he murmured. "That's what you're thinking. Let your name do what your banners could not." Robb let his head fall back against the planks, closing his eyes against the dizzying spin of sky and rain. "I'm thinking I don't have the right to die easy," he said. "Not while the North pays the price for my mistakes." The river carried their little craft past a line of black trees leaning over the water like old men. Somewhere beyond them, faint and fleeting, came the distant call of wolves. When he surfaced again, the stone walls and torches of the twins were gone. The ceiling above him was low and smoke-stained, the beams warped with age. The air smelled of fish and damp ashen blood. Hands pinned him to rough wood. His back screamed where splinters bit into torn flesh. Someone gripped his shoulders, another his legs. The pain in his side flared white-hot, and he jerked against the hold, a hoarse cry tearing free. "Stay down," Brynden Tully growled near his ear. "You thrash, you die." Robb tried to steady his breathing. Sweat slicked his skin despite the chill. He felt hands at his side, fingers probing around the broken shaft of an arrow. Fire raced along his ribs. "For the love of the seven, at least give him some wine," a woman's voice said, thin and tremulous. "We gave him all you had," Hallis answered. Robb recognized the thick northern burr even through the haze. "He's drunk enough to sail to Braavos and back, but the pain's stronger." "I told you not to talk," Brynden snapped. "Less talking, more holding." Robb forced his eyes open. The world swam in and out of focus. Brynden loomed over him, jaw clenched, a knife in his hand. His mail was off, sleeves rolled up, forearms streaked with red. Beyond him, in the dimness of the hut, he glimpsed a narrow bed, a hearth with a dying fire, and a thin-faced man and woman pressed into a corner, clutching each other as if the war had burst through their door and taken their home hostage. "It had. Easy, lad," Brynden muttered, though his hands were anything but gentle. "On 3. 1. The knife bit. There was no 2 or 3. Robb's world exploded into red. He woke sometime later with his cheek pressed to rough linen and a coarse blanket dragged up to his chest. The pain in his side had become a deep, throbbing ache rather than a raw blaze, though each breath still reminded him of the holes that had been there. Outside, gulls cried. Morning light pried at the cracks between the boards. Voices murmured near the door, low enough that they might have been arguing or praying. He rolled his head and found Brynden Tully seated on a stool beside the makeshift bed, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The older man's face was drawn, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear when they met Robb's. "You live," Brynden said. "That's something. How long?" Robb's voice rasped like old parchment. "Most of a day," Brynden said. "You gave us reason to think we'd dragged a corpse all this way for a time. Then you started muttering. Father's name, mostly. Mother's. Gray winds. The last name was a knife." Robb looked away, toward the hearth where a thin fire had been coaxed into life. Hallis dozed in a chair, head lolling forward, hands still resting on the hilt of his sword. The fisherman and his wife were nowhere in sight. "Them?" Robb asked. "Gone," Brynden said. "I gave them coin and told them to go upriver, away from the twins. They wept and thanked us and swore they'd never speak your name to anyone. Fear's a better seal on a mouth than gold, in any case." He sat back, studying Robb. "You should be dead." "Many men are," Robb said softly. "More will be," Brynden replied. "Walder Frey and Roose Bolton have not enough blood between them to pay for what was done in that hall. Still, we live. That leaves us with the burden of thinking what to do with that fact." Robb stared at the low ceiling, The events of the night before, if it had been only a night, crowded in on him. The betrayal. His mother's last cry. The moment Grey Wind's voice had been cut short. "I swore to win the North's freedom," he said. "I swore it on Father's memory. Instead, I marched our men into a trap like a child chasing banners in a tourney yard." His throat tightened. "I have no right to speak for anyone anymore. Perhaps not as their king," Brynden said. "But you're still Eddard Stark's son. And the North will not be rid of you so easily. Already, ravens will be flying. Songs will be written. The king who died at the wedding. It makes a good tale." "It's a lie," Robb said. "All the better," Brynden replied. "True stories rarely move men. Lies, though, lies can raise armies." Robb closed his eyes. The pain in his side beat in time with his heart. "Let them think me dead," he whispered. "Let them mourn and rage and bend the knee or raise their banners as they see fit. But if I live, I cannot stay here. Not where every Frey and Bolton henchman will be picking through the reeds for survivors." Brynden's mouth quirked, grim and approving. "So you've not lost all your wits with your blood. Good, because there's only one direction that makes any sense now." "North?" Robb asked. "To try to rally what I can? South and North are both choked with Lannister gold and Frey treachery," Brynden said. "No, I mean East." The map was little more than a scrap of parchment with smudged ink lines, but Brynden Tully treated it as if it had been drawn by maesters in Old Town. "Here," he said, tapping a thick finger on a crude bend in the river. "We are somewhere along this stretch of the Green Fork, not far from the Freys' reach, but far enough that they won't smell us straight away. We float downstream until we join the Trident proper. From there, two choices." He traced one line northward. "We could try for the neck, hide among the bogs and crannogmen. Your father had friends there, men who owe him more than they owe any southern king." His finger slid east instead. "Or we push on to the sea, to White Harbor. House Manderley has always been truer than their Southron gloss suggests. From there, ships," Robb finished hoarsely, "to cross the narrow sea." Brynden's gaze met his, the corners of his mouth lifting in a humorless half-smile. "You are not the only Stark who can put pieces together." Hallis shifted at the door. "Essos," he said, as if it were a curse. "Begging your pardon, my lords, but what good will the far side of the world do the North? Our people are here, under Bolton knives and Lannister gold. And what good does Robb Stark do them if he is dead and buried under a cairn by this miserable river?" Brynden asked sharply. "The Freys will bolt the twins and crow about their victory. The Boltons will slink back to the Dreadfort, flaying every man, woman, and child they think might have once looked kindly on a Stark. The Lannisters will drink their wine and send letters of congratulation. In a moon's turn, the world will have settled into the notion that the North is broken. That is the moment, Hallis, when a dead king may be worth more than a live one." Hallis frowned, but he said nothing further. Robb swallowed, the taste of river smoke lingering in his mouth. "You think to hide me," he said slowly, "to let the story of my death harden. And while they all relax, believing they have one, you learn," Brynden said. "You heal. You grow cleverer than your enemies." The young wolf was brave and bold and just, but he was also predictable. He thought honor was a shield. It isn't. Not in this game. His hand clenched on the map's edge. "Your grandfather fought in the War of the Ninepenny Kings. Your father survived Robert's rebellion. Both of them learned hard lessons about power. You have been taught your lessons faster and crueler. If you live, you cannot be the boy who rode south with banners streaming and songs at his back. You must become something they have not prepared for." "What?" Robb asked quietly. Brynden Tully held his gaze. "A ghost," he said. "A shadow that moves where they do not see. A man who can cross ports and courts without his name hanging like a noose about his neck. On the far side of the sea, kings and queens barter with sellswords and dragons are spoken of as half-remembered nightmares. If aught remains in this world to truly shake the Lannisters' hold, It will be found there, not in some burned crofter's field outside the Twins. The word dragon hung between them, more ridiculous than any fool's song, and yet Robb's mind flashed to the stories old Nan had told in Winterfell's kitchens. Tales of Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters, of Harrenhal melting like tallow under dragonfire. He had dismissed them as ancient history once, tales of a world that had no bearing on the one he inhabited. Then again, he had once believed guest right held against all things. "The Targaryen girl," he murmured. "I've heard tales from traders. A young queen with 3 dragons in the east." "Perhaps," Brynden said. "Perhaps not. Rumors travel faster and farther than truth. But there are old magics in that land, and older grudges. If you wish to break what has been built here, you will need more than northern steel and stubbornness. You will need something that makes men like Walder Frey and Tywin Lannister wake in the night sweating, hearts pounding. Something they have no defense against." Robb stared at the map until the ink lines blurred. "And if I go," he said, "what of the north in the meantime? My sisters, my brothers, if any still live, Jon on the wall. If they think me dead, they may do as people always do under conquerors," Brynden said. "They may bend, they may break, they may endure. You cannot carry them all on your shoulders, Robb. You tried, and we saw the result in that hall." His voice softened. "Go east, learn, gather what you can. Then come back when the world no longer expects you." Robb's fingers tightened on the blanket. The thought of leaving Westeros tore at him almost as fiercely as the arrows had. But beneath the grief coiled a slow, cold resolve. "All right," he said at last. The word felt like crossing a threshold he could never recross. "We go to White Harbor, then to the sea. But the name Robb Stark stays on this side of the water." Brynden nodded once. "As you say, my lord." The first thing to go was his hair. Robb sat on the rough plank of the boat's bench while Brynden Tully stood over him, knife in hand. The river whispered against the hull, carrying them away from the Twins and toward a future that felt as uncertain as the fog on the water. "Hold still," Brynden grunted. "Unless you fancy losing an ear. Nasty thing to explain in a Braavosi tavern." Robb closed his eyes as the knife sawed through tangles. Strands of auburn fell to the bottom of the boat, mixing with the mud and blood already there. Each lock seemed to carry a memory with it. Snow in the Godswood at Winterfell, Catelyn's fingers combing his hair when he was small and fevered, Talisa's hand smoothing it away from his brow as she laughed at some foolish jest. When the old night was done, Robb ran a hand over his head, feeling the unfamiliar prick of short hair. The man in his memory, the young wolf with the wind in his curls and a crown on his brow, was gone. In his place sat a lean, scarred stranger in plain wool and worn leather. "We'll need a name," Hallis said, shipping the oars for a moment to rest his arms. "Can't go calling you Your Grace in every harbor from here to White Harbor." "Use it once more," Brynden said dryly. "Get it out of your system. After that, if you call him anything at all, let it be Master or Captain or You There Fool." Robb's lips twitched despite himself. "Robb Stark has to stay dead," he agreed. "Let the North have its ghost. I'll be." He searched for something that did not fit too poorly. "Ned Snow," he said at last, the words tasting bittersweet. "A bastard sailor from the Bight. My father was a fisherman, my mother a fool. No one worth remembering." Brynden's brows lifted. "You'd name yourself for him even in jest?" "I'd rather have his name than any other," Robb said. "And if some drunk in a tavern hears it and thinks of Eddard Stark, he'll laugh to himself and say that every northern bastard claims such for his father. No one will look twice." Hallis snorted. "Ned Snow, then. I'll try to remember. And me. You." Brynden tilted his head, studying the man. "You're a Sellsword. You took service with the late king in the north once, but he died in a hall of treachery, and you took what you could and left with your skin intact. You have no interest in northern politics, save what coin they bring. You will find this new captain of yours a rough master, but he pays in silver and asks few questions." Hallis grimaced. I don't like it. Nor do I, Brynden said. But liking has little to do with living. The river widened as they went, banks retreating, current gentling. Once, a patrol of Frey men rowed along the far shore, their armor glinting dully in the fading light. The men in the boat ducked their heads, letting their worn cloaks and drooping shoulders tell their own story of small folk beaten dull by war. The riders never even glanced their way. As the sun sank, painting the water in dull brass, Robb watched the line of the twins dwindle behind them until it was just a dark smudge against the sky. He kept his face blank, jaw set, while inside something pulled and tore and reknit in shapes he did not yet recognize. Robb Stark died there, he murmured under his breath, so quietly even Brynden could not hear. He died with his mother and his wolf. What's left? What was left was cold and tired, and more dangerous than he had ever been when banners snapped over his head. White Harbor rose from the sea like a promise half-kept. Its whitewashed walls and rounded towers gleamed even under a sky the color of old pewter. Ships bobbed 3 and 4 deep at the quays, fishing boats from the Bight, trade cogs from Gulltown and King's Landing, a sleek Braavosi galley with a painted prow. The smell hit Robb first. Tar and brine and rotting fish, laced with the sour of too many people pressed into too small a space. It was a far cry from the clean cold of Winterfell's courtyards, but there was life in it, life that had not been snuffed under treacherous rafters. He should have ridden through these gates as king in the north, banners streaming, House Manderly's knights in shining plate to greet him. Instead, he came on foot, cloak patched and plain, a coil of rope over his shoulder, his crown buried at the bottom of a chest now serving as a seat for Hallis when he grew too weary on the journey. Brynden Tully walked at his side, hood up, leaning on a staff like any tired old soldier. He had traded his sigil for a plain leather jerkin, though no clothes could fully hide the way he carried himself. The easy prowl of a man who had seen too many battlefields to be surprised by much. "Keep your head down, Ned," Brynden murmured as they joined the flow of dockworkers and sailors. "You stare too long, and someone will decide you're thinking above your station." Robb lowered his gaze. The cobbles beneath his boots were slick with seawater and fish guts. A hawker cried oysters in a high, nasal voice. Children darted between barrels, laughing as they chased a dog with a stolen crust. Twice, they passed men in mail bearing House Manderly's merman sigil on their cloaks. Robb's heart thudded harder each time. He had met Wyman Manderly only once, years before all this, when the great lord had come to Winterfell to feast and talk of ships with his father. The man had seemed half hedonist, half shrewd banker, his booming laughter filling the hall even as his eyes weighed every word. Robb had liked him. He wondered what the Lord of White Harbor would say if he knew his dead king limped past his own docks disguised as a dockhand. "Where?" Robb murmured. Brynden tilted his head toward a less crowded quay where smaller ships were tied. "There. We don't want a king's galley or a whale lord's pleasure barge. We want a ship whose captain counts coin more carefully than questions." Hallis snorted softly. "So any Braavosi, then?" They found her at the end of the 3rd pier. A weathered cog with peeling paint and patched sails, her name Storm Dancer, half flaked off the hull. Men moved about her deck with the weary efficiency of long practice. At the foot of the gangplank, a woman with salt in her dark hair and a scar along one cheek leaned against a barrel, counting coins into a pouch at her belt. "Captain," Brynden said, slipping back into the easy, rough-edged tone of a sellsword, "we hear you're bound for the Free Cities." The woman's eyes flicked over them, assessing. "I might be," she said. "Depends who's asking. You look like the sort of men who bring more trouble than your passage is worth." "We bring coin," Brynden said, gesturing to Hallis's chest. "Silver, and we ask for nothing more than a place on your deck and no questions." "Plenty of men have come through here wanting no questions these last weeks," the captain said. "War leaves a lot of people eager to be somewhere else. I don't make it my trade to care why, so long as they don't bring the war onto my planks." Her gaze lingered a fraction too long on Robb's face. You've the look of someone's lost son." Robb met her eyes, letting the weight of exhaustion and bruised grief show plainly. "My father died in the south," he said. "That much at least was true. I've nothing left here." She studied him another heartbeat, then nodded. "All right then, boy. You and your uncles." Her lips quirked at Bryndon's scowl. "Braavos first. After that, we'll see. Passage is 3 silver stags each. Pay now, and keep your heads down when we pass any warship with more banners than sense." Bryndon counted the coins out without haggling. It scraped at Robb, who had grown used to measuring out other people's lives instead of silver, but he held his tongue. He watched the captain's hands instead. Strong, fast, nails bitten down. A woman who had weathered more than one storm and preferred profit to politics. "Welcome aboard, Storm Dancer," she said, tucking the pouch away. "If you've enemies in White Harbor, best they not see you go. We sail with the evening tide." By evening, White Harbor was a smear of light behind them. Robb stood at the rail as the ship's prow cut through the darkening water, watching the last solid piece of Westeros recede. The wind tugged at his cloak. The sea opened before him, vast and unknowable. Somewhere beyond the curve of the horizon lay the free cities, with their assassins and bankers, their temples to foreign gods, their whispers of dragons. Robb Stark rested his weight on the rail, feeling the ship's bones creak beneath his hands, and made himself a promise. He would cross this water as nobody, as Ned Snow, bastard and exile. He would come back as something else entirely. The sea at night was a different world. No trees, no towers, no walls. Only the slow rise and fall beneath his feet and the hiss of waves against the hull. The sky had swallowed its stars, clouds piling high and heavy like dark mountains. Lightning flickered far off, forking pale veins through the black. Ned, he reminded himself grimly, had grown up with stories of it, but stories could not have prepared him for the immensity of the thing. It straddled the narrow mouth of the harbor, legs sunk deep into rock, arms lifted as if in warning or welcome. Fires burned in its eyes, twin coals watching the world with cold, dispassionate light. Storm Dancer slid between its legs like a child creeping past a sleeping giant. The water here was choppier, currents tugging and swirling, as if even the sea were unsettled by the stone colossus. Robb felt the deck shift beneath his boots and tightened his grip on the rail. Behind him, the creak and mutter of the ship had softened as most of the crew fell into exhausted sleep. A few men still paced, keeping an eye on the rigging and the horizon, but they paid him little mind. To them, he was just another refugee torn loose by a war they did not care to understand. He closed his eyes and listened to the water. In its endless rush, he could almost hear the trident again, the clamor of hooves and shouts, the clash of steel against steel. The words of his bannermen echoed faintly. "King in the north," they had cried, voices wild with hope. King in the north. What was a king? A man others agreed to pretend was more than he was. A point on which loyalties and ambitions could hang. Kill the man and the structure shook. But if the name lived on without the man, if memory and myth took root, perhaps Bryndon was right. Perhaps a dead king could be sharper than a living one. He thought of the north as he had last seen it. Snow-covered hills, the gray towers of Winterfell rising from the heart of the land like a stone heart. He saw Theon Greyjoy's crooked smile and then the burned husk of the castle Theon had claimed. He saw Bran and Rickon chasing one another through the Godswood, Sansa singing tunelessly in the solar, Arya with her hair tangled and her face smudged, wooden sword in hand. He did not know which of them still lived. That ignorance might have been the worst wound of all. Footsteps approached, soft on the planks. Bryndon Tully came to stand beside him, leaning his elbows on the rail. For a time, they said nothing. The old knight's gaze was fixed on the darkness ahead, as if he might will the free cities to rise from the sea by stubbornness alone. "You should sleep," Bryndon said eventually. "When we reach Braavos, there will be no time for rest." A man who arrives with eyes red from the voyage and tongue thick from drink is less likely to be noticed, I grant you, but I'd prefer my nephew be able to stand without swaying when we go ashore. I slept for most of a day in that hut, Robb said. My body rests enough. My mind. He shook his head. Every time I close my eyes, I see that hall. Hear her scream. Bryndon's jaw tightened. Grief can drown a man faster than the sea. Better to sip it and keep your feet than to open your throat to it and sink. And you? Robb asked. How much have you sipped? Enough to know it never truly empties. Bryndon's mouth twisted. I have buried brothers, nephews, lovers, friends. The cup only grows larger. You learn to carry it without spilling too much on the people around you. A wave slapped the hull, sending a spray of cold water over them. Robb wiped his face with the back of his hand. Tell me of Braavos, he said. If I am to be born there, in a manner of speaking, I should know the place. Bryndon's eyes narrowed, a glint of approval there. Braavos is a city that remembers it was founded by slaves, he said. They hide that under masks and coins and songs, but it's always there under the marble. No king has ever ruled it. They bow to the Sea Lord, but they kneel to their own purses. The Titan guards their harbor, and their courtesans are courted like lords. There are temples to 100 gods, and one to the god of all of them at once. The many-faced god, Robb murmured. He'd heard whispers, half believed, from merchants and mercenaries who passed through his camps. And the Iron Bank, Bryndon grunted. Aye, if you owe them, they will have their due, whether from you or from your children. If someone owes you and you have the bank at your back, the same applies. Gold is a god in Braavos, and those who kneel to it do so with open eyes. It sounds, Robb searched for the word, complicated. It is, Bryndon said, and that is why we go there. In a simple place, your foes could find you easily. In a crowded, crooked, murky place, a ghost can make a home in the cracks. Robb looked out at the black water again, at the thin line where it met the equally black sky. Somewhere beyond that line lay a city of coins and masks and faceless gods, of secrets and shadows. He had been born in Winterfell's clean cold, under a sky full of stars and a father's steady gaze. Now he sailed toward a world where nothing was steady and no gaze was ever simple. I will learn their games, he said softly. I will learn their trades and tricks and magics if such exist. And then, when no one in Westeros remembers the feel of my living breath, I will return. Bryndon's smile was a thin, sharp thing. That's the spirit, he said. Sleep, ghost of the north. Tomorrow you begin again. Robb stayed at the rail a little longer after his uncle left, watching the lightning flicker on the horizon. For an instant, the sea was lit in stark white, and in that flash he imagined he saw the shadow of something vast moving beneath the waves, some old things stirred by war and change. When darkness settled again, he did not feel smaller, only more keenly aware of how much there was still to do before he could claim he had even get anything at all. The Titan rose from the sea like a god carved out of mountain and storm. Robb Ned, he reminded himself grimly, had grown up with stories of it, but stories could not have prepared him for the immensity of the thing. It straddled the narrow mouth of the harbor, legs sunk deep into rock, arms lifted as if in warning or welcome. Fires burned in its eyes, twin coals watching the world with cold, dispassionate light. Storm Dancer slid between its legs like a child creeping past a sleeping giant. The water here was choppier, currents tugging and swirling, as if even the sea were unsettled by the stone colossus. Robb felt the deck shift beneath his boots and tightened his grip on the rail. First time's always like this, Captain Rella said from near the tiller, her voice a low rasp half claimed by the wind. Some piss themselves, some pray, some just gape. You look like the third sort, Snow. He did not bother to correct the name. Does it ever fall? He asked instead, watching the Titan's shadow swallow them whole, the fires in its eyes reflected on the water, painting the waves in streaks of red and gold. Not yet, Rella said, and if it does, I hope to be somewhere with more forgiving gods than Braavos by then. She spat over the side for luck. Robb watched the stone feet slide past, barnacle-encrusted and dark with age. Arrow slits gaped along the Titan's thighs, murder holes cut cunningly into its belly. Somewhere within that mass of stone and iron, men watched with real eyes, ready to rain death on any ship that came uninvited. "Remember this?" Brynden Tully murmured at his shoulder, his hood shadowing his face. "Braavos is a city that armors even its myths. Nothing here is only what it seems." Robb kept his eyes forward as they passed under the Titan's shadow. The sound of the surf against rock thundered in his ears, echoing like the roar of some deep-throated beast. For a heartbeat, he felt very small indeed, the last broken son of a dead lord sailing into a city that had never heard his name. On the far side, the harbor opened like a hand. Braavos rose around it in tiers and islands, a tangle of low houses and high towers stitched together by bridges and boats and ropes. The air smelled of salt and smoke and strange spices. Bells rang somewhere in the maze of streets, overlapping chimes of different sizes and tones. "Welcome to Braavos," Captain Rella said. "Mind your purse and your pride. The first will keep you fed. The second will get you killed." Small boats darted among the cogs and galleys like minnows among whales, oars flashing. Some bore painted masks on their prows. The green-painted faces of courtesans, the stern visages of priests, the hook-nosed sneers of moneylenders. Everywhere Robb looked, there was motion, commerce, life. Ragman's harbor lay to port, a crush of piers and quays where foreign ships crowded shoulder to shoulder. Flags from the Summer Isles, Lys, the Basilisk Isles, Pentos, and Volantis fluttered among more familiar stag and lion and kraken. Shouts rose in tongues Robb did not know, braided with the harsh, sing-song cadences of Braavosi. Storm Dancer threaded herself through the chaos with a certain weary grace, answering shouted orders and coded whistles. At last, with a creak of ropes and a thump of timber, she nosed up to an empty stretch of dock. "Lines!" Rella barked. Men sprang to obey, looping ropes over bollards. The ship settled, her long voyage from White Harbor to Braavos complete. Robb felt the change deep in his bones. Westeros lay behind him now, across leagues of gray water. Before him spread a city that owed fealty to no king. He had never felt so far from the God's Wood of Winterfell, or so free of the crown that had cost him almost everything. "Come on, Snow," Brynden said, jostling his shoulder. "We stand out less on land than we do gaping like provincials at the rail." Robb drew a steadying breath and stepped forward as the gangplank thudded into place. When his boot met the wood, something shifted in him. A soft click, the closing of a door. He did not look back as he descended to the dock. The noise of Ragman's harbor hit like a physical thing. Voices layered atop one another until they became a continuous roar. Braavosi, Lyseni, Summer Islanders, Ibbenese, the guttural barks of men from the east whose names Robb did not know. The calls of gulls and the slap of waves against the stone quay only added to the din. Stalls and tents crowded the narrow space between water and buildings. Here, under sagging awnings, merchants hawked silks and spices, cheap trinkets and dubious charms, knives, stolen jewelry, and things that looked suspiciously like human teeth. The air was thick with the sense of fish and garlic and unfamiliar incense. Brynden Tully moved through it with the wariness of a man who had seen too many markets in too many cities. His hand rested casually near the knife at his belt, his cloak drawn tight enough to conceal the small bulge of mail beneath. Hallis followed, hunched around the chest he carried as if it were merely full of tools rather than the last of their coin and a few carefully wrapped pieces of silver and bronze bearing direwolves and trouts. Robb kept his head down as Brynden had warned, but his eyes were everywhere. He watched a group of Braavosi water dancers in tight-fitting vests and breeches spar in a side alley, their slender blades flickering like slivers of light. He saw a masked courtesan glide past on high wooden clogs, her painted smile demure and knowing beneath a cascade of red-dyed hair. He watched an old woman with one eye and no teeth toss bones on a cloth and mutter about fates in a language he could almost understand. "Keep close," Brynden murmured. "Braavos takes more men whole than the sea ever did. You wander down the wrong canal, you'll find yourself owing debts you never meant to make." "I thought you said debts were what we came here for," Robb said under his breath. Different sort of debt, Brynden replied. The kind we choose, not the kind that chooses us. They ducked under a drying line strung with multicolored cloth, narrowly missing a splash of something unidentifiable from a window above. A narrow bridge arched over a green-tinged canal to their right, its balustrade carved with leaping dolphins. Beyond, Robb glimpsed taller buildings of pink and gray marble, their windows trimmed in gold. The richer quarters, Brynden said, following his gaze, where the Sea Lord and the bankers and the more respectable merchants play at power. We'll not be going there. Not yet. Where then? Hallis asked. Brynden nodded toward a crooked lane leading away from the harbor, its paving stones slick with spilled wine and fish guts. A sign creaked above the mouth of the alley, painted with a green eel wrapped around a tankard. The Inn of the Green Eel, he said. Cheap beds, cheaper ale, and patrons who know when not to see things. I spent some months there in my exile after Riverrun. We'll find room enough to disappear for a time. The inn proved to be exactly as Brynden promised. Low-ceilinged and smoky, its common room crowded with sailors, Braavos, and the sort of mercenaries who looked as if they slept with their boots on out of long habit. The air buzzed with languages. A lute plucked ragged chords near the hearth, where a pair of dice players argued over whether the last throw had been fairly made. The innkeep was a narrow-shouldered Braavosi with a nose like a hooked blade and a talent for looking unimpressed. His name, Brynden murmured, was Ilario. He recognized the older man with a small nod that did not quite become a bow. You were supposed to be dead, old fish, Ilario said in accented common. Or so I heard from a man who heard it from a man who said he had a cousin by the twins. Many men are supposed to be dead, Brynden replied. Some of us are inconsiderate enough to disappoint them. Ilario's gaze slid to Robb, to Hallis, to the chest. You bring trouble with you, Tully? Only the kind that can pay for its drink, Brynden said. 3 beds or something that passes for beds. A small room if you have it. We'll take the stables if you don't. Ilario weighed them with his eyes. Robb kept his face blank, letting his shoulders sag as if from long labor. At last, the innkeep shrugged. 2nd floor, he said. End of the hall. It used to be a storeroom. Now it's a room that stores men who snore. 7 coppers each a night. More if you bleed on my floor. Brynden paid without haggling, though Robb saw the faint tightening at the corners of his mouth as he handed over the coins. Each one they spent was a stone in a wall between them and any easy way back. As they climbed the narrow stairs, the sounds of the common room rose and fell below them like the tide. Robb set his hand on the rough wood of the banister, feeling the grooves worn by countless palms. Above his head, the ceiling beams were smoke-blackened. The air smelled of stale beer and onions and the faint, cloying hint of cheap perfume. Their room was as Ilario had promised. Small, low, and bare. 3 pallets lay on the floor, stuffed with straw that crunched when Hallis prodded it with a boot. There was a single narrow window that looked out over a canal choked with garbage and the faint glimmer of lantern light from the opposite bank. It will do, Brynden said. For a time. Robb let the weight of his pack slide from his shoulders. It hit the floor with a dull thump. He stood in the middle of the cramped space, breathing in the smell of a city that had never known the words king in the north, and felt the last shreds of that title slip from his skin like an old, ill-fitting cloak. Ned Snow, he thought. Bastard. Exile. Student of foreign ways. The first steps of his return began here, in a room too small to hold his regrets. They began with his feet. Too heavy, the Braavosi said, prodding Robb's boot with the tip of his slender sword. You walk like a man marching into battle. This is not a march. This is a dance. Step lightly or you will sink. The man's name was Morio, though half the inn called him master, and the other half called him worse if they thought he could not hear. He was lean and sharp-nosed, his hair pulled back in a greasy tail. A half-healed scar ran along his jaw, a white track against olive skin. His dark eyes missed little. Robb Ned shifted his weight, trying to do as instructed. He had learned his first sword strokes in Winterfell's yard under the eyes of Ser Roderick Castle. Heavy steel in hand, boots planted firm on packed earth, the Braavosi style felt wrong in his bones. Too light, too fluid, like trying to fight on water. "Again," Morio said. "Step and turn. Let the blade lead you, not your shoulders. Your enemy will not be kind enough to stand still and wait for you to plant yourself like a tree." Robb took a breath, let it out, and moved. Practice sword up, feet sliding over the rough floorboards of the Green Eel's back room. He stepped forward, turned his hips, brought the blade around in a sweeping cut. The motion felt smoother than it had the day before. Less like a man wading through mud, more like Morio's lunge came in like a striking snake. The thin blade tapped Robb's ribs just above the bandages where Storm Dancer's roll had slammed him one night, reminding him of the wounds he still carried beneath his shirt. "Dead," Morio said. Again. Sweat dripped down Robb's spine. The room smelled of oil and damp wood, of men's breath and the faint sour tang of spilled ale from the common room beyond. Brynden Tully watched from the wall, arms crossed, jaw set. Hallis was there too, leaning on his sword, a skeptical frown creasing his brow. "This is not the way we fight in the north," Hallis muttered. "Nor is the north where we are," Brynden replied. "Let him learn. You never know which move saves your life until after it has done so." Robb wiped his brow with the back of his hand and reset his stance. His shoulders ached. His thighs were beginning to tremble from hours of footwork. But there was a stubbornness in him older than his crown. He had lost a kingdom. He would not lose to one half-starved Braavo with a quick wrist. "Again," he said before Morio could. They went at it until Robb's arms felt like boiled leather and his breath came in ragged pulls. He took hits. Stinging taps to wrist and shoulder and ribs, a sharp crack to his knuckles that made his fingers tingle. But he gave some back as well, and each time Morio grunted and stepped back, Robb felt something hot and fierce stir in his chest. He was learning to move differently, to step aside instead of forward, to let an attack slide past with a twist rather than blunt it with brute strength. Morio's blade hissed past his ear. Robb ducked, turned, brought his own practice sword around in a tight arc that wrapped against the Braavosi's thigh. Morio's eyes narrowed. "Again," he said. Later, when his body finally refused to answer any further demands, Robb sat on the floor with his back against the cool plaster wall. His shirt clung to his skin. His hands shook when he reached for the cup of watered wine Brynden passed him. "You're improving," his uncle said. "I'm being beaten slightly less quickly," Robb replied, taking a swallow. His tongue felt thick, the wine sour and thin compared to northern ale. "I don't know what you call improvement in Riverrun, but where I grew up we called that still losing. Battles are often decided by who loses slowest," Brynden said. "And you're learning more than footwork. You're learning another way to think." Robb glanced at Morio, who was leaning against the far wall, wiping his blade with a rag and pretending not to listen. "He fights like water," he said quietly. "Unpredictable, yielding until he isn't. My father's men fought like stone. Stand fast, hold the line, break the charge. But out here, stone sinks," Brynden said. "Water flows around what it cannot break. Remember that when you think of the men who broke you at the Twins. Walder Frey built his castle on a river, but he never learned to respect it. He wanted to be stone, so he sold himself to lions made of gold instead." Robb's grip tightened on the cup. The memory of the hall surged up. Catelyn's scream, the spray of blood, the moment Grey Wind's howl faltered and died. It burned, as it always did, but now there was something else coiled around it. A cold, patient anger. "I won't be stone anymore," he said. "Not where they expect it, at least." "Good," Brynden murmured, "because the men we need will not all be from the north. They will be from places like this." That night, after the training and a bowl of fish stew that tasted mostly of garlic and bones, Robb lay on the pallet in the narrow room and listened to the sounds of Braavos seep through the walls. The distant slap of poles on water, the laughter and curses from the common room below, the soft chime of bells marking some hour he did not know. He flexed sore fingers and imagined, for a moment, his hand closing on the hilt of a different kind of power. If he meant to break Westeros free, he would need more than a sword. He would need to become something they had never thought him capable of being. News of home came in scraps and tatters, carried on the tongues of men who had fled it. In the common room of the Green Eel, Westeros was always dying and always being reborn, depending on who did the telling. Tonight it died under the words of a scarred knight whose once fine cloak still bore the ghost of a lion. Its red and gold faded to rust and straw. They sewed the wolf's head to his body. They did, the knight said, fingers tight around his cup. His eyes were bleary with drink, but the words had the hard shine of something polished through repetition. Paraded him around with his beast skull on his shoulders and his mother's blood still wet on their boots. A message, Lord Frey called it. A warning to every traitor lord who might think to bite the hand that feeds him. Traitor to whom? The Ironborn beside him snorted. He wore his beard in tight braids, each bound with a bit of rusted metal. Last I heard, those wolves were just taking back what was theirs. North belongs to the Ironborn when we're strong enough to hold it, but I never heard of a lion feeding a wolf anything but arrows. The knight glared. Call it what you like. The young wolf's dead either way. The songs have started already. In King's Landing they sing that the rains of Castamere played while he choked on his own blood. Or was it the bear and the maiden fair? Depends on who's buying the singer his wine. Across the table, a thin man in a salt-stained cloak traced a finger along a crude map of Westeros someone had inked on the wood. Doesn't matter, he said. Lions sit the Iron Throne. Boltons sit Winterfell if there's anything left of it. Freys hold the crossing. Anyone who remembers the Starks fondly does so far from their lands or deep in their cups. The rest bend the knee and count themselves lucky. Robb sat with his shoulders hunched, the hood of his worn cloak casting a shadow over his face. His cup of ale had grown warm in his hands. The room's heat pressed in, smelling of sweat and smoke and fish. Dead. They spoke of Robb Stark as dead. He had expected it. It was the plan, he reminded himself. A ghost king was more useful than a hunted one. But hearing it from another man's lips, hearing the lies layered onto the half-truths, still cut deeper than Morio's practice blade ever could. Is it true? Someone else asked. A Sellsword with Myrish eyes and a chipped tooth leaned forward. That the North rose as one for him? That he never lost a battle until he lost his head? The knight snorted. No one never loses a battle. He lost men, lost ground, lost allies like any man. His victories just made better songs. But the North came when he called. For a time, till hunger and gold and fear did what swords couldn't. Robb took a swallow of ale that tasted of stale bread and bitterness. He forced his face to remain impassive, to be Ned Snow, a bastard sailor with no more stake in these tales than any other man nursing an old hurt. What of the wall? Another voice asked. I heard talk in the Purple Harbor that wildlings were swarming south. A king beyond the wall, some said. Others claimed dead men walked again. Dead men always walk in tavern tales, the Ironborn scoffed. I've killed enough of the living to know they don't need any help being trouble. But the wall, the thin man murmured, tapping the top of the map where it sketched a long line across the north. If there was a Stark there, Ned's bastard, John they called him, he might still hold it. The old blood doesn't break easy. The words struck Robb like a thrown stone. John. For a heartbeat, he saw his half-brother's face as he had been the last time they'd spoken. Standing in the yard at Winterfell, cloaks snapping in the cold wind, eyes shadowed but steady. Bastards don't count, the knight said roughly. Only trueborn names are written in the ledgers of history. Brynden Tully's voice drifted from the next table, where he sat with his back turned, dice in his hand. Sometimes, sire, the names men are too proud to write are the ones their grandchildren curse themselves for forgetting. The scarred knight glanced over, but Brynden had already turned his attention back to the dice, shaking them with a lazy rattle. Robb stared at the crude map on the table. The ink was smeared where tankards had spilled. The line of the neck wavered, the north bowed in the middle. But the wall held straight, a dark mark separating known from unknown. If Jon lived, if any of them lived, they were doing so under the shadow of his supposed death. Under the boots of men who had broken guest right and called it justice. The conversation drifted to other things. The price of saltfish in Old Town, a rumor that the Targaryen girl had taken a city called Meereen with her dragons, the way the Iron Bank had shifted its loans since Tywin Lannister began ruling his hand again. Robb drank silently and listened, filing away each piece of information like a blade he might one day put to use. He was learning to live with his own ghost. In the mouths of these men, Robb Stark became legend and cautionary tale, martyr and fool. Let them talk. Let the story grow. A story was harder to root out than any living man. In the shadowed corner, Bryndon's gaze met his for a fraction of a heartbeat. There was understanding there and something like pride. You wanted to be king, that look seemed to say. This is what kingship looks like now. Passed from tongue to tongue, beyond your grasp. Robb lowered his eyes and listened to them talk about the king who had died in a hall full of music. The first time Robb saw the Red Priest, he was trying not to think about dragons. The rumor from the common room, that a Targaryen girl across the world had woken 3 of the creatures from stone, had lodged in his mind like a sliver. He had told himself it was nonsense, or at best some exotic exaggeration crafted to make distant politics more entertaining to drunk sailors. Dragons belonged to old Nan's tales, to tapestries in castle halls, not to the dirty, jostling life of Braavos. Then he turned a corner near the canal and walked into fire. The square was small, paved with uneven stones cracked by roots. A half-dozen canals intersected nearby, their greenish water reflecting the last smear of sunset in stuttering fragments. A crowd had gathered, drawn by heat and light and the promise of spectacle. At its center stood a man in robes of red and orange that shimmered like embers. His hair was shaved close to his scalp, his beard short and neatly trimmed. A ruby hung at his throat on a chain of copper, catching the flames that licked from the brass bowls on iron stands behind him. In his raised hand he held a torch, its tongue of fire reaching hungrily for the darkening sky. For the night is dark and full of terrors, the priest was saying in heavily accented common. His voice rolled over the crowd, sonorous and practiced. And only the Lord of Light can drive them back. You, who walk in shadow, who fear what waits beyond your doors when the candles go out. You need not be afraid. The light can find you. The fire can cleanse you. If you but... His words faltered. His gaze snagged on Robb like a hook. For an instant, the sounds of the square receded. Robb felt the weight of that look settle over him. It was not a soldier's measuring glance, nor a merchant's calculation. It was something else entirely, as if the priest were seeing not the plain sailor's clothes, not the shortened hair and unremarkable face, but the shape of him beneath, the blood in his veins, the scars hidden under his shirt, the wolf that had howled and then gone silent. Robb's hand went to the hilt of the knife at his belt, an instinct as much as anything. Bryndon, at his side, shifted subtly, putting his body half between Robb and the priest. The torch in the priest's hand flared brighter, just for a heartbeat. The ruby at his throat pulsed in time with his heartbeat, or so it seemed to Robb. If you but open your eyes, the priest finished, his voice softer now, almost distracted. And see. Around them, the crowd murmured. A woman in a ragged shawl reached toward the heat, eyes shining with something that might have been hope or desperation. A Braavosi Bravo snorted and spat, tugging his companion away. A child pointed at the flames and laughed. The priest lowered his torch slightly, but his eyes did not leave Robb's face. After a moment, he smiled. "Tonight," he said, addressing the crowd again, though his gaze stayed fixed, "I will speak of kings and wolves and the shape of smoke upon the snow. Those who wish to hear more, come to the temple when the moon is high. The Lord of Light has shown me things, and I would not keep them to myself." He lifted his free hand in a gesture of blessing or warning, and then thrust the torch toward one of the brass bowls. The flames leapt, catching and spreading from one brazier to the next in a quick, hungry chain. The gathered people murmured, impressed. Coins clinked into a small bowl at the priest's feet. Brynden tugged at Robb's sleeve. "Come," he muttered. "We've fish to eat, and I've had my fill of southern gods." Robb let himself be drawn away, but not before the priest inclined his head in a small, deliberate nod. "He knows," some panicked part of Robb whispered. "He knows what you are, who you were." That night, as they ate stew in the common room and listened to the same songs about his supposed death, the memory of the priest's eyes lingered. When Robb finally went up to the pallet and closed his eyes, he dreamed not of the Red Wedding, nor of Winterfell, but of a field of snow lit by a strange, shifting light. In the dream, a wolf stood upon a rise. Its fur was gray as storm clouds, its eyes pale and unblinking. Above it, the sky burned with ribbons of red and orange and a harsh, cold blue. Something moved there, vast and sinuous, scales glinting like shards of obsidian and ice. When Robb woke, his heart was pounding, his mouth dry. The room was dark. The sounds of Braavos pressed against the thin walls like a tide. He lay awake until dawn, thinking of fire and snow and a priest whose eyes had seen too much. Brynden cursed him for a fool all the way to the temple and came anyway. "It's one thing to listen to a red-robed charlatan shout in the street," he muttered as they slipped through the narrow alley that led to the temple. "Quite another to walk willingly into his nest. I've seen what these fire priests can do when they set their minds to it. I've no wish to have you burned into some hero's vision of sacrifice." Robb said nothing. He kept his hood up, his pace steady. The square from the day before had emptied with the setting of the sun, but the memory of the priest's gaze had not faded. It tugged at him, an itch he could not help but scratch. The temple itself was smaller than he'd imagined. No soaring pillars or gilded domes, just a squat building of dark stone set back from the canal. Its only adornment a relief of flames carved above the door. The air inside was hotter than the streets, thick with the smell of smoke and some resinous incense that stung the eyes. A long, shallow brazier ran the length of the room, its flames rising and falling in strange rhythms as if breathing. A handful of people knelt before it. A woman with scarred hands murmuring in a tongue Robb did not know. A pair of sailors from Volantis with tattoos spiraling up their arms. A boy no older than 15 whose clothes marked him as Braavosi, but whose expression was pinched and fearful. The red priest from the square stood at the far end, hands folded, watching the fire as if it were speaking to him. His ruby glowed faintly in the brazier's light. Robb and Brynden took a bench near the back. Hallis had refused to come, muttering something about not trusting any god who loved fire so much. That was fine. Robb preferred fewer eyes on him if things went sour. For a time, they simply sat. The flames shifted, coiling and stretching, casting shadows that danced along the stone walls. Heat pressed against Robb's skin, beating sweat along his brow. The crackle of burning would become a soft, constant murmur. "You came," the priest said eventually without turning. Robb's hand twitched toward his knife. "Plenty of men came," he said. "Your god seems popular in this city." The priest laughed softly. "My god is not popular. He is patient. There is a difference." He turned then, and his eyes found Robb in the dimness as easily as if the younger man had shouted his name. Up close, the priest's face was younger than Robb had expected. Perhaps only a few years older than himself, though the set of his mouth and the lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of a life lived close to flame. The ruby at his throat pulsed in time with his heartbeat, or so it seemed to Robb. "You are far from home, Robb Stark," the priest said in flawless Northern. The name fell like a stone in still water. Brynden's hand went to his knife. Robb's breath caught. "It's Ned Snow now," Robb said stiffly, shifting so that his body was angled, half blocking Brynden's instinctive movement. "You mistake me for another man." The priest smiled, and the fire brightened. "If you wish to lie, lie to those who cannot see. I am no great seer. There are red priests who can pull kings from the flames and name their deaths. I am not one of them, but even I can see a ghost when one sits in my temple. Robb's jaw clenched. If you mean to shout my name to the canals. I mean to do no such thing, the priest said. Your enemies believe you dead. That is a gift few men receive. I will not steal it from you. Sit. Listen. If my words give you nothing, you may walk out as you came and I will forget your face. Brynden hissed softly. Careful, lad. Robb hesitated, then sank back onto the bench. You have me at a disadvantage, priest. You know me or think you do. I don't know your name. Lawler knows us all, the man said automatically, then seemed to catch himself. But you may call me Maros. I was born in Volantis under a different name, but that is for another fire. We speak of you tonight. Robb forced his hands to unclench. What do you see when you look at me, Maros? Maros's gaze flicked to the flames. I see a wolf that should be dead, walking through a city that does not know his scent. I see snow stained with blood that is not all his own. I see a crown made of shadows and ash. I see cold fire. Cold fire? Brynden echoed skeptically. You speak nonsense. Do I? Maros tilted his head. When I saw you in the square, the flames leapt. They do that sometimes when a man of destiny comes near, or a woman, or a child. I am no fool. Destiny is not always kind. It may mean only that your death will matter more than your life. But with you, the fire did something else. It shrank. It drew in, turned blue. As if it looked upon something that was its opposite and did not know whether to devour it or be devoured. Robb thought of his dream. The wolf on the snow under a sky of red and blue light. Something vast moving above. I am no king, he said quietly. Not anymore, if I ever truly was. Maros's mouth curved. A man is what he does, not what is shouted when he enters a hall. You tried to tear a kingdom from a usurper's hands. You failed. That does not mean your part is played. Tell me, Robb Stark, what would you do if given another chance to change the song they sing of you? Robb stared into the flames. Shapes moved there, as they always did when man stared at fire too long. He saw wolves and lions, castles and fields, a long line of ice that might have been a wall or the edge of the world. I would make sure they never forgot that wolf's bite, he said. That treachery has a price in more than songs. I would break the men who broke their oaths, not for my pride. For the North. Maros nodded as if he'd expected no other answer. To do that, you will need more than swords, more than honor. The men you name have plenty of steel, and they have twisted honor into a cloak they wear over their shame. You need something older. With respect, B. Brynden said dryly. If you're about to tell us that something is your god, we've heard that song before. Different priests, different altars, same tune. Maros chuckled. I am not so arrogant as to think my god will kneel to your cause, old knight. But the Lord of Light's fires show me shapes. In them I have seen dragon wings over snow. A man with a wolf's shadow standing beside a beast of night and flame. This city has relics of dead empires scattered through its markets, gathering dust while men haggle over the price of fish. One of them calls to you. Robb's throat went dry. You speak of dragons, he said. I speak of possibilities, Maros replied. There is a man in the Chequy port, a collector of curiosities from Valyria and the lands around it. He has in his hoard a stone egg taken from a smoking island where nothing living should dwell. He cannot hatch it. He cannot even warm it. But he keeps it still, for it is beautiful and men will pay to look upon beauty. When I look into my fires, I see your hands upon that egg. I see the shell cracking. I see a shadow made flesh. Brynden snorted. And what do you ask in return for this vision, priest? Our coin? Our souls? The promise that when this Wolf King takes back his crown, he'll burn your enemies before any others. Maros spread his hands. I ask nothing but that you listen. If you go to this collector, if you purchase the egg or steal it or smash it upon the cobbles in disgust, that is your choice. The Lord of Light does not need your service to burn. But I am a man who has seen glimpses of a war larger than the petty squabbles of kings. In that war, a wolf and a dragon stand on the same field. If I can nudge the pieces one finger's width closer to that end, perhaps I have done my duty. Robb's heart hammered. Where is this collector? He asked. Morrow smiled. Ah, he said. Now we come to questions that may change more than your own fate. The warehouse smelled of dust and old sea salt, of wood and metal and something faintly sour that Robb could not place. Lanterns hung from the beams, their light making islands of brightness in a sea of shadow. Between them, on racks and shelves and tables, lay the detritus of dead empires. Here, a length of dragon bone carved into the shape of a woman's arm, fingers tipped with claws. There, a helmet of strange, rippled steel that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. A dagger whose blade was a swirl of dark and darker, edges so fine they almost hummed. A tall, thin candle of black glass that had never known a flame. Robb's gaze dipped over them, lingering on the dagger for a heartbeat longer than the rest. Bryndon's hand on his shoulder squeezed once in warning. They had not come for knives. The collector waddled ahead of them, his rich robes brushing the floor. He was Braavosi, or had been once, though the years and meals had blurred the sharpness of his features. Gold rings crowded his fingers. His hair was cut in the local fashion, but oiled and perfumed. His name, he had announced with a self-satisfied flourish, was Lomar Morito. You understand, of course, Lomar was saying, that I do not usually open my collection to just anyone. These are rare pieces, priceless, some of them. Men have killed for less. But when Maros of the Red Flame comes to me and says, Lomar, there is a man who must see a certain object in your keeping, well, he spread his hands. Who am I to argue with the gods? You don't strike me as a man who argues with anyone who might cut off your supply of exotic curiosities, Bryndon said mildly. Lomar chuckled, the sound bubbling in his throat. You wound me, my friend. I would never let piety interfere with profit. Here we are. He stopped before a table draped in dark velvet. On it sat an egg. At first glance, it might have been a lump of polished stone, the size of a man's head. Its surface was scaled in tiny overlapping plates, each one a shade of black so deep it looked almost blue. When Robb stepped closer, he saw threads of silver and gray running through the darkness, like veins of ice or faint lightning trapped beneath the shell. The air around it felt different. Not warmer or colder exactly, but charged, as if just before a storm. A curiosity, no? Lomar said. Brought to me by a Volantene shipmaster whose crew swore they had taken it from a smoking shore on the outskirts of the dune. Mad, if you ask me. Men who sail too close to Valyria usually don't come back at all. Perhaps that is why he wanted to part with it so badly. To be rid of the memory. And you were fool enough to keep it, Bryndon said. Fool enough to recognize value, Lomar corrected. Men pay well to look upon such things, to imagine dragons and empires and magic as if they were not all dust now. He leaned in, lowering his voice. They say a Targaryen girl in the east has hatched 3 like it. I doubt it, of course. Stories grow in the telling. But even the rumor makes men's purses looser. Robb did not hear the rest. The egg held him. He stepped closer, drawn. Each scale seemed etched with patterns too fine for his eyes to fully resolve. When he reached out, the hair on his arms rose, as if in anticipation or warning. Careful, Lomar said sharply. You break it, you buy it. Robb's fingers brushed the shell. It was not warm as he had half expected. It was both. A strange sensation, like pressing his hand into water that was hot and cold at once. For an instant, he felt something shift under his palm, as if the egg had taken a breath. A wolf's howl echoed in his head, distant but clear. He snatched his hand back, heart hammering. The warehouse rushed in again. The creak of timbers, the hiss of a lantern, Bryndon's sharp intake of breath. Maros watched him from the shadows beyond the circle of lamplight, his face unreadable. You felt it? The priest said softly in the tongue of Volantis. The stone that is not stone. Lomar frowned. You see? This is what I mean. Men come in here, they touch, they gasp, they cross themselves or pray. They feel stories. That is all this is. A story turned to stone. A very valuable story. How valuable? Brynden asked. Lomar's eyes gleamed. To the right buyer? 5,000 gold honors. Perhaps more. Brynden's snort was pure Riverlands. You may as well ask for the Sea Lord's palace while you're about it. Not from you, of course, Lomar said smoothly. You reek of soldier's pay, not banker's books. But for you as a friend of Maros. He tapped his lip, feigning thought. 300 gold. A bargain. You could resell it in lists for twice that. Robb thought of the chest back at the Green Eel. Of the few pieces of silver and gold they had not yet been forced to melt or trade. Of Catelyn's silver trout brooch. Of the small iron circlet he had once worn on his head. Wrapped now in cloth and hidden beneath a false bottom. We don't have 300 gold, Brynden said. We don't have 30. What you have, Lomar said, is a stubborn look and the stink of fate about you. I am not so foolish as to ignore when men like Maros bring others to my door. But I am also not so foolish as to part with this for the price of a barrel of salt cod. Robb reached for the egg again. This time, when his fingers touched the shell, he did not flinch. He let the strange sensation wash over him. The not heat, the not cold, the feeling of pressure from within. I can't give you what I don't have, he said quietly. But I have some things that aren't coin. Lomar snorted. I am too old to be seduced by pretty boys, if that's where your mind goes. Robb ignored the jest. He unclasped the small leather pouch at his belt and drew out a brooch. It was silver, wrought in the shape of a leaping trout. The workmanship was fine but unostentatious, crafted by a Riverland smith with more pride than flash. It had been his moth. Hers. She had worn it on the day of his father's execution, and on the day they had named him king in the north. The metal caught the lantern light, gleaming softly. Lomar's eyes sharpened. That, he said, is Westerosi work, old highborn. You stole it or you killed someone who wore it. Either way, it has a story. I like stories. Robb's fingers tightened around the brooch. For a moment he could not breathe. The smell of the warehouse fell away. He was back in Riverrun's hall, watching Catelyn pin it to her gown. Her hands had been steady that day, though her eyes had not. It was my mother's, he said. She is dead. I have no house to return it to, no chest where it might lie safe. All I have is this and a need that outweighs sentiment. Brynden's gaze flicked to him, then to the brooch. Something like sorrow passed through his eyes, quickly buried. Lomar pursed his lips. Pretty, he said, but silver is not gold. Sentiment does not buy passage or bribes. What about knowledge? Maros said from the shadows, stepping forward. You still seek a buyer for that fragment of glass candle, do you not? You told me once you would give much to know whether it still works as the old tales claim. Lomar's tongue darted out to wet his lips. Many men claim much in my presence, he said cautiously. I do not always listen. I can show you whether it works, Maros said. If you give the egg to this man for half what you ask, less even, think of the coin you could make if you sold waking dreams instead of trinkets. Robb watched them barter, the words flowing around him like the canal water outside. Part of him wanted to protest, to say he would find some other way, that he would not trade his mother's last tangible memory. Another part, colder and more ruthless, recognized the truth. Catelyn Stark was gone. Her brooch would not bring her back. But an egg that might be more than stone could help him carve meaning from her death. At last Lomar huffed. You drive a harder bargain than any Lyseni whore, Maros. Very well. The brooch, the coin you have, and your promise to show me whether the candle works. In exchange, the egg leaves my care. Maros inclined his head. Done. Robb placed the brooch in Lomar's hand. It was a small thing, a bit of metal and memory. As it left his fingers, he felt another door close behind him. The boy who had been Catelyn Stark's son, Eddard Stark's heir, king in the north, stepped further into shadow. Lomar wrapped the brooch in a cloth with surprisingly gentle fingers and tucked it away. Then he turned, grunted, and lifted the egg with both hands, as if it weighed more than stone should. "Take your story, then," he said, placing it carefully in Robb's arms. "May it bring you riches or ruin, or both." The egg was heavy, and heavier still for what it meant. Robb cradled it against his chest. The shell pulsed faintly under his palms. A wolf's howl echoed again in his mind, closer this time. The egg felt heavier in the cramped room than it had in Lomar's warehouse, as if the walls pressed its weight back into Robb's arms. He sat cross-legged on his pallet, the egg resting in his lap. Its dark scales glimmered in the candlelight, patterns of silver and gray shifting when he moved his head. His hands cupped it gently, fingers splayed to cover as much of the shell as he could. "It's only stone," Brynden said gruffly from his place against the wall. "Don't stare at it too long or you'll start seeing your own face in it." "It doesn't feel like stone," Robb murmured. He could not find better words for the sensation. The shell was smooth under his fingertips, cool and yet not. When he pressed his palms more firmly, he thought he felt resistance. Not from the hardness of the shell, but from something beneath it. As if the egg were not an object but a barrier, and something on the other side pressed back, testing. Maros stood near the narrow window, his face turned toward the canal below. The moonlight limned the sharp edges of his profile, silvering the ruby at his throat. He seemed content to let Robb sit with his doubts. "You said you saw this in your fires," Robb said finally. "Me, the egg, a dragon." "I saw shapes," Maros replied. "Men like to pretend fire speaks in words. It does not. It shows. We do the rest. We fill in the missing pieces with our fears and hopes. Dragons are easy to see in flames. They are made of fire in our minds. And yet you led us to it," Brynden said. "You intervened with Lomar. Men don't risk coin and favors on maybes." Maros turned, leaning one shoulder against the wall. "I risked little," he said. "If you fail to hatch it, I have lost the chance to sell one trinket to a rich fool. If you succeed," he shrugged, "then the world will be different. Perhaps worse, perhaps better, but different." Robb traced the curve of a scale with his thumb. "What if I don't want dragons?" he asked quietly. "What if I want my father back, and my mother, and my bannermen, and the chance to undo every foolish choice that led to that hall?" "Then you are like every man who has ever come before a god's altar," Maros said. "Wanting the impossible. The Lord of Light does not return the dead. He burns them." Brynden's mouth tightened. "I have seen a man return," he said. "Thuras of Myr did it. With your same god and your same words. The one they call the Lightning Lord died and rose again half a dozen times if the tales are true." Maros's eyes flicked to him with surprise. "Thuras," he said. "He used to drink away his days in Myr. If he found purpose in fire, it is no wonder the rest of the world trembled." "He found more than purpose," Brynden muttered. "He found a way to wrench men back from where they ought to have stayed. Every time there was less of them. The light gives and the light takes, priest. Don't pretend your god is generous." Maros's jaw worked. "We are none of us whole," he said at last. "Not after death touches us. Your nephew knows that better than most. But we are speaking of life, not death." Robb kept his gaze on the egg. "If there is something in here," he said, "if it is more than stone, what does it make me if I wake it? A Targaryen usurper? A northern fool playing at Valyrian games? It makes you a man with a weapon your enemies do not," Maros said. "How you use it, that is another matter." Robb closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, he felt the familiar weight of his father's gaze, the steady, quiet expectation. Eddard Stark had believed in duty, in the slow work of justice. He had not believed in shortcuts, in bargains with gods. But Eddard Stark had died in a Southron city because his honor had not been sharp enough to cut through treachery. "I swore to protect the North," Robb said softly. "I failed. If there is a way to do more than raise one more army to die in one more field, I would be a coward not to try." Words like that are how men build pyres as well as kingdoms, Brynden murmured. But he did not try to take the egg from Robb's hands. Maros stepped closer, his bare feet silent on the floorboards. The heat from the temple still clung to him, a faint warmth in the cool air of the room. "There are places where the world is thinner," he said, "where fire and blood have soaked the earth so deeply that mere stone remembers. Bring the egg there, and feed it heat and sacrifice, and it may wake. Or it may crack and be revealed as nothing more than clever rock. But if you sit here in this room, clutching it like a child with a toy, nothing will change." "Where?" Robb asked. Maros hesitated, then said, "East of here, the coast is jagged with old scars. Ruined Valyrian outposts cling to islands no sane captain visits. Smoke still rises from some of them. There is one, the locals call it Dragon's Rest, though no dragon has perched there in living memory, where the ground is warm underfoot and the air smells of sulfur. Volantene traders sometimes go near to harvest obsidian. Most do not linger. I believe the egg will recognize it." "You believe?" Brynden echoed. "Not you know." Maros's smile was thin. "If I knew, I would not need faith." Robb lifted the egg slightly, feeling the drag on his tired arms. "How far?" he asked. "A few days' sail from here, if the winds are kind and pirates scarce," Maros said. "I have a friend with a ship, a man who owes me a favor and who is too greedy to turn down the promise of obsidian and whatever else he might scrape from a cursed shore." Brynden rubbed a hand over his face. "You realize we're about to sail toward the doom," he said to Robb. "Most men with sense sail away from it. Fast." "I sailed away from my last mistake," Robb replied, "and it followed me anyway in songs and stories. Perhaps this time, I sail toward something that's mine to claim." The egg's shell pulsed again under his hands. This time it was not his imagination. The candle flame beside him flared, then steadied. A bell rang, marking an hour he could not name. In his mind, a wolf paced the edge of a cliff, watching a far horizon where something vast moved behind a curtain of smoke. Robb opened his eyes. "We go," he said. The second time Robb passed the Titan, it watched him go instead of come. The new ship, smaller than Storm Dancer, lower in the water, her single mast bearing a sail patchworked from more colors than sense, cut through the morning mist with dogged determination. Her captain was a hard-eyed woman from Pentos named Dana, her crew a mix of Valentenes, Braavosi, and one sour-faced summer islander who eyed Maros's bronze brazier as if he expected it to explode. Robb stood at the bow, the wind cool on his face. Beneath his cloak, the egg rested against his chest, wrapped in layers of cloth and leather. Its weight was a constant reminder, a solid presence above his wounded ribs. Behind him, Brynden muttered to Hallis as they adjusted the rigging. Neither of them liked the look of the eastern sky, where a faint haze smudged the horizon. Whether it was ordinary sea mist or something more, they could not say. Sailors told stories of that direction, of ships that vanished, of screams carried on the wind, of lights under the water that lured men to their deaths. Near the stern, Maros knelt beside a shallow bronze bowl bolted to the deck. Within it, a small fire crackled, sheltered from the wind by a ring of metal. He murmured in his own tongue, words Robb did not know but whose cadence carried the weight of ritual. "You sure that's wise?" Dana asked, nodding toward the bowl as she passed. "Fire on a ship makes sailors nervous." Maros smiled without looking up. "Without fire, your cook would serve you raw fish and stale bread," he said. "Without fire, you would freeze on cold nights. Without fire, you could not harden pitch or temper steel. Fire is no more dangerous than the men who wield it." Dana snorted, spoken like a man who has never seen a lantern knocked over in a storm. But she did not order him to douse it. As the ship slipped past the Titan's legs, Robb glanced back. The stone giant loomed in the thinning mist, its fires still glowing in their deep sockets. From this angle, it seemed almost to turn its head, watching the little vessel as it sailed eastward. "Leaving one kind of danger for another," Brynden said, coming to stand beside him. I sometimes wonder if your father would have been proud or horrified. Why not both? Robb asked, his breath puffed white in the cool air. He taught me to do my duty. He never said it wouldn't terrify him. Bryndon's mouth twitched. That's fair. He marched with a mad king once. Compared to that, sailing toward a cursed shore with a dragon egg under your cloak might seem almost reasonable. Robb's hand went to the egg, pressing gently. The shell felt as it had before. Neither hot nor cold, both heavy and strangely alive. He wondered if there was a thing inside, could feel the motion of the ship. Did it know it was moving toward fire? Did it sense the man carrying it? Do you believe this will work? He asked quietly. Truly. Bryndon stared out at the sea, its surface a dull pewter under the pale sky. I believe in men, he said after a moment, in their capacity to surprise, to endure, to ruin everything and then somehow build something from the wreckage. I have seen priests call down miracles that were nothing more than tricks of timing. I have also seen things in war that no septon could explain away. If you ask whether I think you will hatch a dragon by sailing to a smoking rock and burning some offerings, I do not know. That is not an answer, Robb said. It's the only honest one I have, Bryndon replied. But I believe this. If the world is to change enough for wolves to stand against lions and dead things and whatever else is stirring beyond that wall of yours, it will not do so by men repeating the same mistakes. You tried honor. You tried steel and banners and the old ways of your house. They failed. Perhaps this will fail too, but at least it's a different kind of failure. Robb huffed a laugh. Comforting. Sometimes survival is just a matter of failing last, Bryndon said, or failing in a way that gives someone else a chance. The sea stretched ahead, vast and indifferent. In the distance, a darker smudge had begun to form where sky met water. Not a storm exactly. Something lower, more solid, as if the horizon itself had thickened. Maros rose from his kneel, hands smudged with ash. He joined them at the bow, his gaze fixed on that smudge. Dragon's rest lies in that direction, he said. We will smell it before we see it. The air grows different nearer the doom. Men say the ghosts of Valyria ride the winds there. I have never seen a ghost, but I have seen men go mad listening for them. I thought your god burned all the ghosts away, Bryndon said. Maros's mouth curved. Even fire cannot consume memory. It only hardens it. Ask your nephew. They sailed for hours. The wind freshened, whipping spray over the rail. Gulls wheeled and cried overhead, then fell away as the shore behind them vanished into haze. By midday, the smudge on the horizon had grown into a low, broken line. The air took on a faint, acrid tang, like quenched steel or distant lightning. Dana stood at the helm, her jaw set. We go close enough to see it, she said to no one in particular. Close enough for your priest to do whatever mad thing he thinks will make him a hero in his god's eyes. Then we turn. I won't have my ship eaten by the sea because some Westerosi boy wants to play at Dragonlord. Robb met her gaze and inclined his head. Fair. He understood her fear. He felt his own, crawling cold and sharp beneath his skin. But he also felt something else rising to meet it. A lean, hungry anticipation. The same feeling that had come before battles, in those brief, clear moments when possibility still outweighed blood. If the egg woke, the world would not be the same. If it did not, he would find another way. He had not bled and run and buried his name just to let the story end with him sailing back to Braavos M. Proprietary-handed. Dragon's Rest was less an island than a wound. The shore rose from the gray sea in jagged shards of black rock, slick with spray and treacherous underfoot. No sand softened the transition from water to land, only sharp edges and the occasional pocket of pebbles that shifted treacherously when stepped upon. Thin plumes of steam rose from cracks in the stone, carrying with them a sulphurous stench that made Robb's eyes water. They came ashore in a small boat, Dana's curses following them on the wind. She had refused to bring her ship closer than a bowshot to the rocks. I like my hull unburnt, she'd said. If you don't come back by nightfall, I'll drink to your souls and sail home richer for the obsidian my men chip from safer shores." Robb did not blame her. Even from the ship, the island had looked wrong. Its contours too jagged, its silhouette too stark against the sky. Up close, it was worse. The ground under his boots felt alive, not with the lushness of soil or the give of sand, but with a slow, deep thrum, like the heartbeat of some buried beast. The egg was a solid weight in his arms, wrapped in layers of cloth to shield it from the worst of the rock's edges. Each step sent a jolt through his wounded side. Sweat slicked his back despite the chill wind. Behind him, Brynden and Hallis picked their way across the stones with curses and care. Hallis carried a bundle of wood and kindling scavenged from the ship stores. Brynden bore torches and a skin of oil, in case the island's damp air refused to take a spark. Maros moved ahead of them all, his bare feet surprisingly sure on the glassy surface, his red robes incongruous against the black. "Here," the priest said at last, stopping at the edge of a natural basin. It was a shallow depression ringed by rock, its bottom cracked and stained. A faint heat rose from it, warming Robb's face even from a few paces away. In some of the deeper fissures, a dim red glow pulsed, like coals buried under ash. "This place remembers," Maros said. "Fire once flowed here like water. It may again, or it may not. But if any patch of earth will answer, it is this one." Brynden grunted. "If the ground opens and swallows us, I'm blaming you." Maros smiled faintly. "You can curse my name with your last breath, old knight. It will make no difference to the Lord of Light." They set to work. Hallis arranged the bundles of wood in the basin, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Brynden splashed oil over the kindling. Robb watched, the egg cradled in his arms like a child. When the pyre was built, Maros took a torch from Brynden and held it over the basin. He began to chant in the language of Volantis, the same cadence Robb had heard in the temple, but stronger now, more insistent. The words wrapped around the sound of the sea and the whisper of the island's hidden fires. "Blood and fire," Maros said at last in the common tongue, his voice low and precise. "That is what wakes dragons in the stories. I have seen enough of the first. The second is this island's gift. The question is, what blood will you give, wolf?" Robb's grip on the egg tightened. "Not theirs," he said, nodding toward Brynden and Hallis. "They have bled enough for my name." Maros's gaze flicked to his side, where white scars spidered out from the wounds the Freys' arrows had left. "You have already given blood for folly," he said. "Now give it for purpose." Robb nodded. He knelt by the basin and placed the egg at its center, nestled among the wood. It looked small there, despite its weight, like a single dark stone in a bed of tinder. He felt strangely naked with it out of his arms, as if he had put down a shield and exposed his heart. He drew his knife left-handed. The right still ached from Morio's repeated strikes in practice. The blade was simple, plain steel, honed sharp. He held his left palm over the egg, the scars from the red wedding pail and puckered along his wrist. "Old gods," he said quietly, surprising himself. The words slipped out in the half-whisper he had used as a boy in the godswood. "If you still hear me, forgive me. I do this not to abandon you, but because the men who spat on guest right did so under your trees as well as under Southron arches. If you have another path, show it to me now. Otherwise," he drew the knife across his palm. Pain flared, bright and immediate. Blood welled, dark red, spilling over his skin. He clenched his hand and let it drip onto the egg. The drops fell, hissing when they hit the warm shell. For an instant, nothing happened. Then the egg drank. There was no other word for it. The blood did not simply spread and cool. It seemed to sink into the scales, vanishing almost as soon as it touched them. The shell darkened, then brightened, the threads of silver within it flaring like veins shot through with molten light. The ground under Robb's knees shivered. Maros thrust the torch into the pyre. The oil-soaked kindling caught at once, flames leaping up around the egg. Heat washed over them, harsher and more immediate than the island's simmering warmth. Hallis staggered back, cursing. Bryndon's hand went to Robb's shoulder, ready to yank him away if the fire surged too high. Robb did not move. The flames licked at the egg's shell, wrapping it in tongues of orange and blue. Smoke curled upward, thick and acrid. The heat drove tears from his eyes, dried the blood on his hand into a tight sheen. "Blood and fire," Maros murmured, eyes fixed on the basin. "Blood and fire." The egg began to tremble. It was subtle at first, a shiver that might have been the play of heat. But as Robb watched, the movement grew. Fine cracks spidered across the surface, branching and branching again. The threads of silver flared brighter, then dimmed, as if something within struggled. A sound rose, barely audible over the crackle of the pyre. A low, insistent thrum, like the hum of a plucked bowstring drawn out and deepened. Robb's heart pounded. His wounded hand throbbed in time with it. The smell of burning oil and wood and sulfur swirled around him. But beneath it there was something else now. A sharp, almost metallic tang that set his teeth on edge. "Seven hells," Bryndon whispered. It's actually..." The egg cracked. A thin line split the shell from one end to the other, jagged and glowing. Light leaked from it, pale, cold, and yet somehow hotter than the fire around it. The crack widened with a soft, tearing sound. Fragments of shell fell inward, consumed by the blaze. Something moved within the flames. Robb leaned forward, heedless of the heat. His blood-slicked hand reached out, stopping just short of the fire. For a heartbeat, all the sounds of the island and the sea fell away. The shape that emerged was small at first. A snout, a claw, a tangle of limbs and wings slick with some viscous fluid that hissed as it hit the coals. The creature shook itself free of the last clinging bits of shell and lurched toward the edge of the basin. Its scales were black, but not like the eggs had been. These were a matte, light-swallowing darkness, edged with a fine dusting of pale silver that caught the firelight like frost. His eyes opened, and Robb drew in a breath. They were not the molten gold he had seen in tapestries, nor the red of Maros's ruby. They were the color of winter sky, an icy, clear gray that saw everything. The dragonlet stumbled, then hissed, a sound like steam on hot stone, turned its head, scenting the air. When its gaze found Robb, it froze. For a long, stretched moment, man and creature looked at one another. Then the dragon moved. It scrambled forward through the embers, wings fluttering clumsily. The fire parted around it, seeming to shy away rather than burn it. It reached the edge of the basin, reared up on its hind legs, and planted its foreclaws on the stone rim. It stretched its neck toward Robb's outstretched, bleeding hand. Robb did not flinch. The dragon's tongue flicked out, startlingly quick, and lapped at the blood on his palm. Its tongue was rough, its breath hot and sharp with a metallic tang. The wound stung as if rubbed with salt. The world tilted. Robb's vision blurred, not with tears this time, but with something else. A rush of impressions that were not his own. Heat, hunger, the scent of sulfur and ash, the feel of stone beneath clawed feet. A vast, echoing emptiness, and within it a single, bright thread of recognition. This. He staggered, catching himself on the basin's rim with his uninjured hand. The dragon huffed, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its claws dug into the stone, gouging small furrows. "By all the gods," Hallis whispered behind him. Don't call on gods now," Bryndon said hoarsely. "They didn't do this." Maros laughed, a sound half wild. "Did they not?" he said. "Or did you think you did this alone, Wolf?" Robb barely heard them. The dragon blinked slowly, its great head, too large for its small body, tilting as if to study his face. It made a soft, chittering sound. Robb lifted his hand, the one that still bleeds. The dragon leaned into it. "Easy," he murmured, surprisingly steady. "Easy, then." Something slid into place between them, a connection that felt like the bond he had once shared with Grey Wind and yet wholly different. Where the direwolf's mind had been shadowed and earthy, full of sense and instincts and the simple clarity of loyalty, this was sharper, more alien. There was curiosity here, and hunger, and a fierce, coiled potential that made his heart race. The dragon's breath warmed his face. His tiny talons flexed, tapping against the stone. Above them, the sky was a flat, blank gray. The sea crashed against the island's jagged shore. The smell of sulfur wrapped around everything. In that moment, on a scrap of cursed rock at the edge of the doom, Robb Stark ceased to be merely a ghost of a dead king. He became something else, something new, something that would make the men who had thought they had ended his story wake sweating in the night, long before they knew his name still lived.